American consumer debt crossed $17 trillion in recent years. Credit card balances hit record levels. Auto loan delinquencies climbed to highs not seen in over a decade. And yet, if you scroll through social media, drive through any major suburb, or walk through an upscale mall, everything looks fine. More than fine. People are driving BMWs, carrying Gucci bags, booking international vacations, posting dinners that cost what some people earn in a full workday. But there's a gap, a growing, widening gap between what people appear to have and what they actually have. In America, looking wealthy has become a lifestyle category of its own. It's not always built on savings. It's not always built on a high income. Sometimes it's built almost entirely on debt, leasing agreements, and the right camera angle. That's what this video is about. We're going to break down 10 specific signs that someone is performing wealth rather than actually building it. Not to judge, not to shame, but because understanding these patterns, whether you recognize them in the people around you or quietly see them in your own behavior, is one of the clearest starting points for building something real. Real wealth tends to be quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. But the performance of wealth, it's loud, and it's becoming harder to tell apart from the genuine thing. Let's go through all 10. The entry-level luxury trap. There's a specific kind of purchase that reveals a lot about how someone thinks about money. It's the entry-level luxury item, the base model of a premium brand. The smallest version, the least expensive item with the most recognizable logo. A BMW 2 Series, a starter Louis Vuitton wallet, a Gucci belt, a Cartier bracelet at the lowest price point the brand offers. These aren't automatically bad purchases. The issue isn't the brand. The issue is the pattern behind the purchase. When someone stretches their budget to the absolute limit just to access the minimum version of a status brand, not because they genuinely value the product, but because they value what the product signals, that's the entry-level luxury trap. The math rarely works in their favor. The average monthly payment on a new entry-level luxury vehicle in the United States now exceeds $800 on a 72-month loan. That's 6 full years of payments. For someone earning $60,000 a year, that single payment consumes nearly 20% of their take-home income, before insurance, before maintenance, before fuel. And here's what rarely gets discussed. That car depreciates the moment it leaves the lot. Within 3 years, it could be worth significantly less than what you still owe on it. That gap, what you owe versus what the asset is actually worth, is called negative equity, and it quietly follows you into the next purchase, often rolled directly into the next loan. The entry-level luxury trap isn't just about a single car or a single bag. It's a pattern. Each purchase signals status. Each purchase costs more than it appears. Each purchase closes off options that would have built real net worth. Real wealth doesn't usually start with the brand. It starts with the math. Constant money talk. Pay close attention to how people talk about money. Not what they claim to have, how they talk about it. There's a specific behavioral pattern that financially fragile people often fall into when they want to appear otherwise. They talk about money constantly. The deal they just got, the price they paid, the income they're expecting, the investment they're about to make. Every conversation eventually circles back to a number, and the numbers are always impressive. Here's the psychological insight behind this pattern. Researchers at the University of California studied what they called compensatory signaling, the tendency to make loud external announcements to manage internal insecurity. Their findings showed that people who frequently discuss their income or purchases with others are significantly more likely to be experiencing financial anxiety, not financial confidence. People who are genuinely secure don't need external validation. Think about the people in your life who you later found out were truly wealthy. Did they announce it? Did every conversation eventually circle back to what they earned or what they spent? Almost certainly not. Real financial security tends to be quiet, old money especially.
The person who has genuinely built something doesn't need every conversation to confirm it. The compounding is happening whether or not anyone knows about it. Constant money talk fills the space where real security hasn't arrived yet. It's anxiety wearing the costume of confidence. If someone around you almost never mentions their finances, that silence is often worth paying attention to.
Designer items over savings. Here's a question worth sitting with. If someone spends $900 on a designer item but has less than $900 in savings, what does that actually tell you? It tells you something precise about priority. And priority reveals financial reality more clearly than income does. In America, the personal savings rate has remained in the low single digits for much of the past decade. A significant portion of households carry essentially no liquid emergency fund. And yet luxury and designer goods have seen consistent growth. There's a behavioral economics principle at work here. Researchers at Harvard Business School studied spending patterns across income brackets and found that lower-income households that made visible, status-oriented purchases reported higher short-term emotional satisfaction, but significantly worse financial outcomes over a 5-year horizon. The designer item delivers an immediate emotional return. A savings account delivers almost nothing, at least not right away. Our brains weren't built for delayed gratification. They were built to respond to visible signals and immediate rewards. The $900 bag sits on the counter. People see it. Comments are made. Status is registered. The $900 in a savings account is invisible. Nobody sees it. Nobody says anything. But that $900 invested consistently in a broad index fund at a conservative historical average could more than double within a decade. The designer item in that same 10 years would likely be worth a fraction of what it cost if it still existed at all. The trade-off is real. It's just rarely visible in the moment, and the moment is what our brains are wired to respond to. That's the trap. The constant one-upper. There's a social behavior that financial fragility often produces, the constant one-upper. You mention a vacation, they've been somewhere more expensive. You buy something new, they already have the upgraded version. You share good news about a raise, they're about to get a bigger one. You describe a good restaurant, they counter with one that's harder to get into. This pattern isn't just annoying to be around, it's financially revealing. People who feel genuinely secure don't need to compete with every statement you make. They're not threatened by your progress. They're not measuring their worth against yours in real time. But someone who has built their identity around appearing to have more, who needs to be perceived as the most financially advanced person in the room, is in a constant state of defensive comparison. Every conversation becomes a subtle contest, and winning that contest requires continued spending to stay ahead. The one-upper isn't just a personality trait, it's often a symptom of a financial strategy built almost entirely on perception management. They upgrade when others upgrade. They buy what impresses the people around them. They stay in a loop of competitive consumption that has no logical stopping point, because there's always someone with more. A bigger house, a faster car, a more expensive trip. Real financial confidence doesn't need a comparison. It doesn't need to win the conversation. People who are quietly building real wealth often let others do the talking. They're not competing. They're compounding. Those are two very different uses of energy, and over time, only one of them produces an outcome worth having. Social media as a performance. Social media has made one thing dramatically easier: looking wealthy without being wealthy. A single photo in the right location with the right item in the right lighting tells a story that can take months to construct and seconds to post. And the audience has no reliable way to know the difference between a genuine lifestyle and a carefully curated performance. A study by Schwab's Modern Wealth Survey found that social media users consistently and significantly overestimate the net worth of people they follow, and that this distortion directly influences their own spending behavior.
People see a lifestyle, they assume financial stability exists behind it. They adjust their own spending to close the perceived gap. This is how social media becomes a financial arms race with no visible finish line and no clear winner. The person posting the business class photo may have used travel points accumulated over 2 years and a credit card sign-up bonus. The person posting the Maldives vacation may have used a personal loan. The person in the designer outfit may have purchased it specifically for the photo and returned it afterward. None of that is visible in the image. The post is clean. The reality underneath it often isn't. For many Americans, the pressure to maintain a curated online presence has quietly become a real expense, an invisible line item in the monthly budget. That's not an exaggeration. Behavioral researchers have documented consumers making purchasing decisions primarily because of what they could post afterward, not because of the object itself. Presence management has become a cost. And the people who are most aggressively performing wealth online are often the furthest from actually building it. The feed is not a balance sheet. It never was. Leasing luxury cars. Leasing presents itself as the smarter financial decision: lower monthly payment, a new vehicle every 2 to 3 years, always driving something current, no long-term maintenance concerns. But for someone using a lease specifically to access a car they couldn't otherwise afford, it becomes a financial treadmill with no exit and no accumulation. Here's exactly how it works. You lease a $65,000 vehicle. Your monthly payment is lower than a purchase loan would be. At the end of the 3-year term, you return the vehicle. You own nothing. You have built zero equity. And then you lease again, because returning to a standard vehicle at that point feels like a public downgrade. The identity has been built around the car. The social signal has been established. Walking it back costs something that isn't financial, so the cycle continues, permanently paying, never owning, never accumulating anything. There's also a layer inside lease contracts that people rarely examine carefully before signing: mileage limits and wear and tear provisions. If you drive more than the contracted annual miles, you pay a per-mile overage fee. If the vehicle shows damage beyond what the leasing company defines as normal wear, you pay at return. These fees can add thousands to the total cost, and they frequently arrive as a surprise. The lease was sold as the financially intelligent option. It often turns out to be the most expensive path over a 10-year horizon. Contrast that with purchasing a reliable, moderately priced used vehicle or financing one on a short loan. Within 4 years, the payment is gone. The car continues to function. The money that was going to monthly payments can now go into something that actually grows. Leasing a luxury car is often less about transportation and more about maintaining an image. And image, unlike equity, does not compound.
Counterfeit goods. This one rarely comes up in mainstream financial conversations, but it belongs in this list. Counterfeit goods. Replica handbags, fake sneakers, imitation watches, items designed to look like something they aren't. The motivation behind counterfeit purchases isn't usually dishonesty in any abstract sense. It's status pressure. Someone wants the visual signal of a particular brand, but cannot afford the genuine item, so they purchase the appearance of it instead. This behavior reveals something precise about the underlying psychology. The priority is not the object, not the craftsmanship, not the function, just the perception. And spending money, even a small amount, specifically to manufacture a false impression is one of the clearest expressions of performance-based financial thinking. There's also a practical risk here that people often overlook. In the United States, importing or purchasing counterfeit trademarked goods carries legal exposure. Fines can be significant depending on the circumstances. Beyond the legal risk, there's a social one. Someone who genuinely understands the product category will often identify a fake quickly. The person who spent money to appear knowledgeable ends up communicating the opposite. The irony is sharp. Real wealth doesn't need replicas. It has no reason to manufacture impressions it doesn't back up.
The energy that goes into sourcing, purchasing, and displaying counterfeit goods is energy that could go toward building something that doesn't require a performance. Get-rich opportunities. There's a specific kind of financial conversation that reveals a lot. It usually starts with, "I'm getting into something." Crypto, a trading algorithm, a multi-level marketing company, a business opportunity with an income claim that seems almost too good to be real. People who are financially fragile and who feel pressure to close the gap between their current reality and the image they project are measurably more vulnerable to these offers. A study by the Federal Trade Commission found that Americans lose billions of dollars annually to investment fraud and business opportunity scams, and that financial stress is one of the strongest predictors of who is most at risk. The pattern is consistent. Someone is performing wealth, they feel the gap between what they appear to have and what they actually have. A fast money opportunity appears to close that gap in months instead of decades. They commit, and more often than not, they lose what they put in. Sometimes the loss is manageable. Sometimes it wipes out the limited savings they had built. But the financial loss isn't the only cost. These schemes almost always come with a community built around the opportunity. They use language about freedom, about escaping the system, about being the one smart enough to see what others missed. That language is deliberate. It's designed to speak directly to the emotional state of someone whose financial identity depends on appearing ahead. Real wealth is almost always built slowly, with instruments that are boring to talk about. Index funds, consistent contributions, time. There is no shortcut that doesn't carry equivalent risk, and the more dramatic the promise, the more carefully you should examine what's actually being offered. Condescending money advice. Pay attention to the tone someone uses when they offer financial advice. Not the advice itself, the tone. There's a specific behavior that emerges among people who are performing wealth. They give financial advice with condescension, as if they've discovered something others haven't yet found, as if they're generously sharing information from a higher vantage point, as if the person receiving the advice is clearly making obvious mistakes that anyone financially aware would recognize. This is revealing for a specific reason. People who genuinely built financial stability tend to be humble about it. They understand that the path wasn't obvious. They know luck played a role at some point. They know that markets are unpredictable and that outcomes are never guaranteed. But someone whose identity depends on being perceived as the financially sophisticated one in the room will often deliver advice in a way that reinforces their status more than it helps the listener. "You really should be doing this. I can't believe you're still doing that. I figured this out years ago." The advice might even be correct, but the delivery exposes something. It reveals that the goal isn't helping, the goal is positioning. People who genuinely have accumulated wealth over time tend to ask more questions than they give answers. They're curious, not declarative. They've lived through enough volatility to know that certainty is almost always overstated. Condescension around money is rarely a sign of financial mastery. It's almost always a sign of financial insecurity that hasn't found a more honest outlet yet. Simply overdoing it. The final sign is the most difficult to define precisely, but the easiest to recognize. Simply overdoing it. The outfit with logos stacked across every visible surface. The car that's a size too large for any practical need. The dinner order placed specifically to be noticed by the table next to you. The vacation post with 4 separate luxury brand references in a single frame. Real wealth tends toward restraint. Not always, but reliably enough that the pattern is worth understanding. When someone has genuinely accumulated resources, they don't need every social interaction to confirm it. The security is internal. The compounding is happening in the background. There's nothing left to prove. But performance-based wealth needs constant external confirmation. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to signal. Every purchase is chosen partially for its visibility. Every accessory is selected based on what it communicates to the people who might see it. And so, things escalate, louder, more expensive, more stacked on top of each other, until the visual is overwhelming, and underneath it, the The financial picture often tells a very different story. There's a paradox at the center of all of this. The people who most aggressively try to appear wealthy are frequently the furthest from actually being wealthy, and the people who make almost no visible effort to signal their financial position are often the most quietly stable. This isn't a universal rule, but it appears consistently enough in behavioral finance research to be taken seriously. Real wealth whispers. Everything else tends to shout. Real wealth whispers. Let's bring all of this together. 10 signs, one pattern running underneath them all. The gap between appearance and reality. In America, that gap has become one of the defining financial features of this moment. Consumer debt is at historic highs, savings rates remain low by historical standards, and yet the visual landscape of prosperity has rarely looked more convincing. That gap creates pressure. Pressure to match what you see, pressure to signal what you don't yet have, pressure to spend in a way that closes the visible distance between where you are and where others appear to be. And that pressure, when acted on, tends to make the underlying gap wider, not smaller. The spending that's supposed to communicate abundance is often the exact behavior that prevents it. Optimize for reality, not perception. The alternative to all of this isn't deprivation. It isn't minimalism as a performance of its own. It isn't driving a rusted car to prove a philosophical point. It's understanding what actually builds financial security and choosing that consistently over what merely looks like financial security. The practical difference is often smaller than people assume. One reliable vehicle instead of 2 payments, a percentage of every paycheck moved automatically into an index fund before the rest of the budget is designed, purchases chosen for function and durability rather than for signal value. Research on long-term financial outcomes is consistent on this point. Households that prioritize savings rate over lifestyle display tend to reach meaningful financial stability significantly earlier and report higher satisfaction over time than households that optimized for visible consumption. Quiet choices, compounding results. Neither one shows up well on camera, but one of them builds something that lasts. Spot the signs and check yourself. These 10 signs are useful for recognizing patterns in the people around you, but the more honest application is internal. Do any of these appear in your own behavior? The competitive spending, the purchase chosen for what it signals, the loan extended to access a brand you can't comfortably afford, the social media post that took 3 tries to get right. Not as self-criticism, as information. The most dangerous version of performance wealth is the one you've convinced yourself is something else. Self-awareness is the first leverage point. The decision that follows it is the second. The final message. Real wealth is built in the decisions that nobody sees. The automatic transfer on payday, the car you chose not to upgrade, the dinner you made at home, the investment account that sits quietly and grows while you do something else. None of it photographs well. None of it generates a comment. None of it performs for an audience. But all of it compounds. The gap between those who build and those who perform tends to be invisible for years, and then at some point it becomes impossible to ignore. Choose what you're building carefully. If this gave you something useful to think about, consider subscribing for more clear, grounded breakdowns of how money actually works. And if you'd like to support the channel, the link is in the description.